Hi, I'm Gary Van Singel. I served in the United States Air Force from July of '56 to December of '63. I'm 86 years old, or 87 years old right now. I was born in Grant, Michigan in 1939, or 37. I keep getting my wife's birthday mixed in there with it. I grew up on a farm and worked on a farm from the time I was about 5 years old until I went off to the Air Force and went to school at the Air Force. We were on a edge of what was called Rice Lake, a great big shallow lake where the Indians used to hunt geese and all that sort of thing. And that was cleared and drained, and we grew onions on that, which was a crop similar to tulips in the Netherlands, because my background is with the name Van Singel is from the Netherlands. And the front half of the farm was what we called highland, although it wasn't not much higher than the muck, but it was heavy clay loam, and we had about 24 cows, and then we grew all the corn and wheat and oats and everything else that it took to raise the cattle. Well, I was born and grew up to about 7 years old during World War II. So a lot of my father's friends had served, and I always kept track of those, and they saved some brass for me, and that became part of my personal collection. Yes, I'd always liked the idea of the military, but I didn't have any real strong desires until I started reading about West Point and Annapolis, and then found out that Air Force Academy was going to be started. And so what happened is when I got into high school and saw the brochures for the Air Force Academy, I contacted my congresswoman, which was Ruth Thompson at the time, and she nominated me for the first class. I wound up getting a alternate position for that class. They only took 10 people that year, and I must have been number 11, and no one dropped out, so I didn't go that year. I wrote a thank you note to Ruth Thompson saying thank you for nominating me and giving me the chance, and maybe I would have better luck next time. To myself, I meant whatever I tried next. She took it as a go-ahead, and she nominated me again. So I had kind of a lot of fun taking all those tests and going down to the Air Force Base. So I took the tests and wound up number 5 out of 9 that went that year. So that's how I got in. So I wound up being in the second class at the Air Force Academy, helping start to make it what it is today. Well, probably that I was kind of shy and bashful, but I was awfully good at academics, and I could pass any test that was given. My talent was better at taking tests than it was studying. And that's probably how I got into the academy, was I aced all the tests.
Now you said your dad's friends, that you saw them come back after they had served in World War II. Did your father serve? Did your parents serve?
No, my dad was exempt because he had a 60-acre farm, and that was an exemption at that time. And he also had a son, and they decided that he was not eligible at the time, and managed to stay that way throughout the duration.
Okay. And did your mom work, or did she just stay at home?
My mom is a definite farm mom, and she probably worked harder than my dad did on the farm, because she loved the farm and my dad didn't. And when they first got married, the first wedding present from her folks was a Guernsey cow, and that was the start of the herd.
Now, did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had 3 sisters. Gail's 4 years younger than me, Donna's 8 years younger, and Vicky's 14 years younger.
And you're the oldest?
Yes.
So you were the big brother to three younger sisters?
That's correct.
Yeah, how was that growing up?
Well, I pretty much ignored them, and I managed to grow up almost like a only child.
Yeah, but you were their protector, I'm assuming.
Well, that's true too. Well, I used to work for other farmers and almost any kind of job you could get. Back then, if you worked during the summer, weeding onions, you made 75 cents an hour. And if you got a really good job during the processing of the onions and that sort of thing, you could make $1 an hour. But I actually worked from the age 5 right on up through.
Different times.
Yeah, they didn't complain about kids working at that time. Coming off the farm, didn't have any idea what was going to happen. And when we got there, they stood us up at attention. And I remember this one master sergeant saying, "You gentlemen are going to learn about 21 seconds what a normal airman learns in about 21 days." Lieutenant came up in front and says, "Attention, drop your bags." And everybody put the bags down. "Pick up those bags." "Drop your bags." Thunk. And from then on, we learned to do just exactly what we were told. One of the interesting things was we marched in a parade the very first day we were there. And I marched in a parade the very last day I was there. I didn't have any problem adjusting to it. I didn't have a problem being told what to do, and I would interpret that and do it my way anyhow, but I didn't let them catch me doing it the wrong way. I'm one of the oddballs in that I liked parades. I was good at marching, I enjoyed it, and probably the biggest reason is I had different roles all 4 years that were different than the biggest share of the cadets. And my first year was carrying the M1 rifle and learning the rifle drill. My second year, I went on the color guard and carrying the wing colors most of the time, sometimes the Union colors. And it was a whole different set of drills. And then the third year, I turned up to be guidon bearer for the squadron, so I was carrying the guidon. And then the fourth year, we had sabers, and so we learned saber drill and did the saber drill in our marching. So it was very interesting to me. And that did carry over into the Air Force a little bit, and that after a few of the officers found out that I was pretty good at directing marching, I wound up taking the airmen over whenever we had a parade at the base where I was stationed, and I would be the one marching the airmen because nobody else liked to do that kind of thing or was comfortable giving those commands. I was in a lot of clubs because that allowed you to do things that were outside the academics and outside the military. And I wound up being in the skeet club and the hunting club. I loved to shoot, which was also different than a lot of my classmates. And I would, what happened while we were there is the skeet club inherited all of the ammunition from the Air Force because they were closing down the Free Skeet Club ranges all throughout the Air Force as an economy move. And the Academy inherited 200,000 rounds of skeet ammunition. Within 4 years, when I graduated, we had that down to about 96,000 rounds, and it was only about 15 to 20 of us that ever was shooting at any given period of time. Dick Davis went into the academy with me that second year. He made it through the first year, and he had been flying before we started at the academy, and he was a crop duster for a local airport in Michigan. And he just loved to fly, and that was why he was there. And in the second year, he was flying a rental plane out of the Denver airport and stalled out and crashed it and was killed in the operation. And that was the end for him. What I remember doing is calling my folks and telling them to go down and help his folks set things up for funeral and to help them make the adjustment. And they went out down from the farm and did that, and helped the Davis family get through that period of time, which was pretty tough.
So all in all, how long are you at the academy?
It's 4 years.
So it's like basically going to college, university.
Yes, and you wind up with a Bachelor of Science degree. You graduate with second lieutenant's bars, and we were a little unusual at that time. We had taken full navigation training, so we had our navigator's wings when we graduated. We had our assignments to pilot training from the academy. You got 2 months graduation leave, and then you reported to the pilot training station. First duty station was Marianna, Florida, and that was a small airport that was licensed to the Air Force for training in T-34s. And I started the training there. I soloed in a T-34, and about 3 months in, I got a real bad bug in the stomach and just couldn't shake it. And I missed enough of the training time that I was actually washed out of pilot training. And because I had my navigator's wings, I was assigned to 622nd Air Refueling Squadron in England Air Force Base, Louisiana, and that's where I spent the rest of my time. I was a navigator, combat ready navigator.
Okay, so you assisted the pilot.
Yes, we tell them where to go, and we'd also set up the orbits, and we would contact the planes that were going to refuel. We'd contact them on the radio, steer them in with the radar, and bring them in behind the plane. The plane we had, the KB-50J, was 4 props and 2 jets and 3 hoses. And the planes would come in, and they would hook up by putting a probe into a basket in the end of the hose. And then once they were hooked up, well, then we could pump about 1,000 pounds of fuel a minute into them. And then we would take them to a drop-off point, give them their coordinates where they were, and send them on their way. And we were just extending their range. Most of what we did was on TDY out of Bermuda, the Azores, or Hawaii, as far as Wake Island. And then other times we would just do practice missions over the United States, getting planes from one side of the United States to the other. One of the particularly interesting times was when the Thunderbirds, our aerial demonstration team, was going cross-country, and we refueled them. And it was kind of funny because the lead pilot from the Thunderbirds came up, and he missed on the first try. And we heard a few chuckles over the radio because some of the other guys had seen that. And he knew if he wasn't going to get hassled something fierce when he got back to the club, he better do something different. So he backed off and says, "I didn't see that right." And he rolled over and hooked up upside down, and then rolled back right side up and refueled. So that got him out of that problem.
You're like an airport, like you're a flying gas station.
Yes, we passed gas at 20,000 feet.
Kind of dangerous, isn't it?
Well, yes, it can be. You definitely don't want to be smoking during refueling, and you don't want to open the bomb bay doors with a cigarette or anything, because what they had done when they remodeled the plane is they put huge rubber tanks in the bomb bays, and that's where we carried the extra fuel. And it was an interesting problem for the flight engineer because he had to manage all that fuel. And we'd had over 100,000 pounds of fuel on that plane, part of it being avgas and part of it being JP4. And you had to make sure you never got the JP4 into the reciprocating engines or they'd blow up. But the jets could burn either one. And what we pressed to the refueled planes was the JP4, which is kind of a high-grade kerosene.
How long did you serve with that unit?
A little over 3 years.
Okay.
I found out that it was just not compatible with my wife's health at that time. My first wife had some serious medical problems, and we just couldn't make it work with the Air Force. So I had asked to be grounded, and the colonel had agreed that he would ground me if I would send a letter of resignation so that he could fill that spot with a flight position. So I did that, and he made me assistant squadron adjutant until I was released. I got interviewed all the way up to the General of Tactical Air Command to confirm that they thought this was the right decision for me. And they agreed with me, and I wound up leaving the Air Force in December of '63. There was one where we were flying out of the Azores. It wasn't all that funny. It was kind of serious because we had been having trouble with J1, the jet engine on the left side, was showing a high oil usage. And we kept track of that, but never decided not to fly. So we're about 700 miles east of the Azores towards Portugal, and we're refueling some fighters going to Germany. And all of a sudden we get a jolt, like the whole plane shook. And the refueling operator called, "Lost J1. I mean, there it goes." And what had happened is the engine had frozen up from lack of oil, and when they lock up at that high RPM, they literally rip themselves off the wing. And it happened to be where the jet plane was, the F-100 that was refueling, and it went over his wing, and one of the cables hit the wing and put a little ding in it, but that's all the damage that the F-100 got. But he jerked off sideways, and that's what jolted the plane, is when he jerked out of the drogue. And we've got everything checked out, shut the fuel off to that area. We're still flying okay, so we could take him, come back up, finish refueling. So he came back up, finished refueling, and we said, "Well, when you get to the club, we got some green stamps for you." And he says, "Well, I'd rather have a laundry ticket if it had been the right engine instead of the left. That torque would have sent it into the side of the airplane." And I've seen pictures of an airplane with the engine crossways through it where they lost one once. Luckily, it didn't hit any control cables, and they were able to land the plane safely.
I'm assuming the engine landed in the water.
No, our engine landed in the water. That one stayed crossways in the airplane.
No, the one you lost, the left.
The one we lost was 20,000 feet into the ocean. I was part of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And when that started, I was on TDY in Bermuda, and we went directly from Bermuda to MacDill, up here in the bay, and we staged out of there. We lived in ready quarters that were STAC quarters because SAC moved out, and we were within running distance of our airplanes so that we could get into the plane and get going anytime real soon. And then there were fighter planes across the field that were, I think they were F-86s that had the drop-down rocket launchers that would send 24 rockets out whenever they triggered it. And one time we're sitting there, and the crew chief was out by the airplane, and over at the fighter part of the station, one of the airplanes caught fire, and the crew chief on the next plane grabbed his plane with a jack and tried to pull it away, and somehow activated that rocket launcher, and 24 rockets were bouncing across the field. Luckily, they weren't armed. But the crew chief saw it coming and couldn't move, and one of those fins of the rockets came by and took his fatigue pocket off so clean that you couldn't see there had been any stitches there. It was that close. And that was a scary time. Okay. During the time when we were flying, though, we would go up set up an orbit over Key West, and we'd normally make a 25-mile orbit. And when the planes came up, we'd head into them and then turn in front of them so they would line up right behind us and refuel. And it was interesting to look out the window and see those fighter planes just totally loaded with armament while we were refueling. When we got through with the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were ready to go home. Obviously, we'd been sitting in those barracks for 2 months. But they said, no, you got to wait until, I think it was next Monday or something, because President Kennedy is going to fly down over Florida, and he wants to see the arsenal in place. So we wound up staying and letting him see the arsenal in place. A couple of months later, they decided to have an air show for President Kennedy, and I got on the demonstration team for that, and we flew the KB-50s with planes in tow, refueling about 1,000 feet off the ground and about 1,000 feet from the stands where the president was. And I did that a little different than a normal one because I didn't have to use the radar. I wound up getting into the little glass dome in the front with a knee pad and a stopwatch, and actually worked it that way instead of doing the normal navigation procedures. But yeah, that was we spent about 70 hours of practice time and going back and forth to be about 10 seconds in front of the president. The academy was a really good thing for me. And it just got you so many credits in so many different subjects that you'd never think of applying for if you went to just a regular college. I think in 4 years I graduated with like 164 credit hours. These are semester hours versus 114 or 120 that I would have gotten if I'd gone to college for 4 years. And it was everything from the humanities to all kinds of engineering, electrical, mechanical engineering, astronautics. We're now the Space Force now, and that's was just the start of it. We were learning then how to plot a course through space, and I really enjoyed that. Well, I wound up interviewing a couple companies as soon as I got out, and wound up with a company that I stuck with for 5 weeks less than 45 years. It went through several different name changes because it was bought and sold and moved and everything. But I probably served in at least a dozen different capacities in that company, a good share of them in engineering, and a lot of it fighting with accountants on projects and that sort of thing. So long that the last 5 years I wound up being an accountant because I knew how to analyze the projects and doing $1 million projects and deciding where the money went and where it had to go and what we're going to do with it.
Okay, and you did that for a while.
Yeah, I did that for almost 45 years.
Now, do you have any kids?
Yes, because of my wife's health, we had to adopt kids, and we had a son and a daughter, and the son has died, and the daughter is still living, and I have several great grandkids, and on from there.
And you said that was your first wife?
Yes.
Okay. And
Gail,
you remarried?
I just remarried 3.5 years ago to Gail. Had a 15-year gap, and then found love again.
Why is a place like this, the Military Heritage Museum, why do you think it's so important for our community to have this here?
Well, from what I can see, we're just reminding and showing people what some of us did. And there's a lot that were in a whole lot hairier situations than I've been, admittedly, although I've been in a few close ones because one time we were refueling and we lost an engine. Well, that's pretty typical in a plane with 4 engines and 2 jets. And then we lost another engine. And then we lost a jet. Turned out we had two props going on one side and a jet going on the other, and headed back for base. And the aircraft commander asked if anybody wanted to jump over the base. He'd make a pass so that we could do that if we wanted to. And we said, well, you're going to land it? Yeah, I think I can land it okay, no problem. We're going with you. So we landed with him. He made one of the best landings he's ever made. Of course, you always say, any landing you walk away from is a good landing. Well, I think they can start to see, by looking at some of the memories, just what we've gone through to keep our freedom. And that's what it's all about, is keeping America free and letting us be a democracy. And even if we're dumb at being a democracy, at least we're doing it. Yeah, I've always been a Christian and had a strong faith, and that's carried me through every kind of situation that I've been in, and that's going to carry me through to the end. And I've been active in church and that sort of thing, but also I've been active in just recognizing God from the mountaintops, because I used to like to climb the mountains and just sit and meditate.